Um, all right, folks. We will be starting now, and I know people are still pouring in, but we will let folks pour in. And great. Um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are joining from. I'm Keshav. I'm a program director at Center for Public Impact Asia, and my pronouns are he, him. It's truly a pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this captivating exploration of participatory storytelling in complex systems. In the next couple of hours, we'll be delving into the power of narratives, shared experiences, and the profound impact storytelling can have in navigating the intricacies of our world. I want to extend a heartfelt welcome to our distinguished panelists who will soon be introducing themselves and all the incredible participants for joining us today. Your diverse perspectives and experiences are what make these discussions for us so enriching. For those of you who might be new to the Center for Public Impact, I'll provide a brief insight into CPI and our work. We are a global social impact organization funded by the Boston Consulting Group, and our mission is centered around driving positive change by shaping the way governments work. We are spread around the globe with teams in North America, Europe, Australia, and Asia. And we also have three global initiatives along with the regional teams, the Climate Change Initiative, Global Development Initiative, and Global Storytelling and Communications Initiative. We work as a learning partner to governments and change makers and develop people-centric policies and initiatives that create a lasting public impact. Today, we come together not just as participants in this webinar, but also as collaborators in our shared belief in the transformative power of narratives. Storytelling at its core, we believe, is a tool for understanding, connecting, and inspiring change at the human level. It's a mechanism through which we can illuminate the human side of policy and engage in meaningful conversations that can shape our future. Joining me in facilitating today's discussion are Anogya and Akshay, both program managers in the CPI Asia team, and they'll be co-moderating and helping out in the discussion alongside me. Hello, Akshay. Hi, Anogya. As we navigate through various aspects of participatory storytelling today, we do so with the underlying commitment to furthering the public impact. The narratives we share, the experiences we discuss, all of these contribute to a broader understanding of how storytelling can be a force for positive change in the public sector. And we'll hear in detail about that. A quick logistics note. This session is being recorded to ensure that the knowledge shared today by the panelists and all of you can continue to contribute to our collective journey towards public impact. Uh, I'd also suggest to keep your introductions, questions, and comments pouring in through the session. We'll try to pick as many as we can, and we'll love for this webinar to be as participatory as possible. Let me quickly take us all to our agenda today, which will start with brief introductions from our panelists, Ima, Stephen, Saurav, Sayonee, Tripti, and Rosie. Post that, we will engage in four focused discussions covering diverse aspects of storytelling methodologies, where our esteemed panelists will share their insights and their experiences with these approaches. Following this, Rosie, who is from our Global Storytelling and Communications Initiative, will also explain how this methodology aligns with CPI's mission. And towards the end, we will discuss learnings and key takeaways from today's session. Once again, your active participation is pivotal in making this whole discourse meaningful and impactful. Great. So now, further ado, I'd like to invite our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves, starting with maybe Saurav. Over to you, Saurav.
Okay, thank you, Kesav. Thank you, everyone, and having me on this interesting panel. My name is Saurav. I'm based in Nepal. I work for the platform called StoryCycle. So the story of StoryCycle is beginning back in 2010, when when we small group of people realized that in the global South, we are missing the content on the internet. So we have a good penetrations of the internet, but we were missing the content for the internet. So we began that. So Ache, would you like to share my slide, or we'll do it later on?
Saurav, right now, we think we'll give a chance for all the panelists to just
Okay.
quickly introduce themselves and then start off. Yeah.
All right. Moving to Sayonee. Thanks, Saurav, for your introduction.
Thanks, Keshav. Thanks, Saurav. Thanks for having me here and having me represent Vaani's work. So, hi everyone. I'm Sayonee and I work for Vaani. I have been a development professional since the beginning, almost kind of decades back. Anyways, we'll come to introducing what we do later on, right, Anugnya?
Yes, Shani.
Yeah, so I basically, Vaani and we work in India. So that's an important context because we have many of our panelists from outside India. So yeah, with that, I'll keep it at that and later we might introduce, our work. Thank you.
Thanks, Sayonee. Over to Tripti now.
Keshav, sorry, I should have cleared my throat before. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tripti Singh. I head the 60 Decibels office in India, and I'm dialing in from Bangalore today. Good to meet everyone and excited to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Tripti. Welcome. Over to Ima.
Hi, thank you so much, Keshav, and it's wonderful to be part of this. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Abdulrahim. I'm dialing in from Singapore. I'm one of three of co-founders and co-director of Curator Caravan. We'll definitely learn more about that. My background is 25 years working on democracy and human rights in Indonesia and the region, currently based in Singapore.
Thanks, Ima. Welcome. Over to Stephen now.
Hi there. Thank you, CPI, for this opportunity. And thank you, Ima, for doing my work for me. I'm also co-director, co-founder of Curator Caravan and the Caravanserai Collective. I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal, and my career has been primarily in interfaith, intercultural dialogue. Great to be here.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome. And last but not the least, Rosie. Welcome, Rosie. If you could introduce yourself.
Thanks, Keshav, and great to hear from everybody. My name is Rosie McIntosh. I am the Global Director for Storytelling and Communications here at CPI. I'm based in Glasgow in Scotland, so it's a very early start. I think the same as Stephen. Never quite sure about the time zone there. And I have been at CPI for around 9 months now, starting to get teeth into all the storytelling work here, but I bring a background in government and in charities and non-profit. For the last 10 years, I was running a community storytelling organisation called Mind Waves. And before that, did various other pieces of work, including leading communications for the government agency that monitors the use of the Mental Health Act and people being detained. So I have a big passion for any stories that highlight the experiences of marginalised people in particular. And I do have huge faith in the ability of stories to improve how we work. So I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone.
Great. Thank you, Rosie, and thanks to everyone for this brief introduction. And what I'll do is I'll hand over to Anugnya now, who will talk about a bit about the first session and how these sessions will go on. Anugnya, over to you.
Thank you, Keshav. Thank you, everyone. Hi, my name is Anugnya. I'm a program manager with the Center for Public Impact Asia. I've been with the team for a little over a year now and really excited to be part of this session and speak with all of y'all. And of course, learn, unlearn, relearn, as we like to say at the Center for Public Impact. The way that the next hour or so is going to go is we will invite each of our panelists who will talk about the wonderful work that they and their organization are doing with regards to storytelling, as well as other participatory elements that they may be using through their organization and their work. And the idea is to just engage in a little bit of an organic conversation with, of course, the panelists. Also, take any questions that come in from the audience. So feel free to leave a question in the chat box or the Q&A, and take questions from other panelists as well. So that's how we'll be going about it. I will invite our first panelist, Saurav from StoryCycle, based out of Nepal, to just join us and take us through the wonderful work and grounded work that StoryCycle has been doing with stories, digital storytelling, climate change, etc. in Nepal. So, Saurav, over to you.
Thank you, Ananya. So thank you, everyone, once again. So StoryCycle, the story of StoryCycle began back in 2009-10, when we are feeling that we have very good internet penetrations around our country, but we are missing the content, especially the local content. So then we team up with a small group of people and start putting informations, whatever we get. So we use map points as a primary content for that. So we start collecting different map points from different locations, especially focusing on the rural part of our country. And later on, so we are very interestingly evolve our idea, our work, our sector, but we always choose the digital storytelling and mapping as a key element of our work. So at the beginning of our work, we promote local information's knowledge by putting those informations on the map points, bring back the story as a video form, put in the YouTube and different open platforms kind of things. Later on, we try to evolve ourselves or innovate small idea that put those informations using map as a primary base and put those informations on top of map. So we call it map-based storytelling. For that, we use Google Map as a primary map and 360 imagery, video, and other content on layer top of the map. So this is quite popular idea we are working right now. So we also do client services with these ideas, especially for the tourism industry and different development sector. But our key element of this work is we do participatory approach with the young people. So while we are doing working with the young people, we work with young people, train them. So doing in the different locations, as you remember, we have a big earthquake back in 2015. We also have another earthquake a few weeks before, but this 2015 was really very big, and we destroyed a lot of small town. So at that time, we tried to bring those story cam technique and bring those stories to raise a fund for these small towns. At that time, we realized that this approach of participatory approach of crowdsourcing those informations and data gives us very strong strengths and ownership of the community. Not only the storytelling approach, but that storytelling approach can be helped to rebuilding those locations by the community themselves. So why I am saying this, the community themselves, but as you realize that in a global south, the systems, the government is always come very late whenever they have to do their work. So, but the community is very strong and very collaborative to work together. So this learning lead us to think about one of the idea that if we can gather together, if we can work with the users, citizens, so we can do a lot of change on our small locations. So with that motive, we start a new platform. It's called Dream City. That platform is more focused on designing sustainable and democratic city by the citizens. So how it can be possible. So Dream City is a very interesting aspirations for everyone, but how could it be possible? So we come up with the 4 steps. So one, we do a mapping so that we have a good skill of that. So we invite young people to work together and put their informations, local business point, landmark on the map. So on that process, they can also learn about those locations. They can also realize the space and the ground, and also they also bring the second steps in the stories of those particular locations, the local narrative. And the third steps is we also bring aspiration of the people of that particular locations. And these three different data and informations, we sit together with the city office and say, okay, these are the information, these are the aspiration of the young people. They want to be, are you able to design such aspirations that young people wants with the city? So it's not 100% proven idea, but it's lead the city into the thinking on the different perspective of the people. So we have done this experiment in different part of the city in a small level and then bigger level. So this is the one of the example that we do in the 2 different city with the young girls, whether they realize the which place is safe for them and which place is not safe for them, and why those places are not safe. You can see in the map, there is the red is the unsafe and the green is the safe place. Based on their informations and data, we talk to the city office and say, hey, these are the informations. You can do small census on those locations so that the girls feel safe on everywhere on the city. So these kind of activities, informations also lead us to think about these preserving local heritage and environment. So recently, our team is working on one of the cultural event that happens last week. It's called Chhat. So it's a very close relationship with the river, pond, water, and local product. So we try to figure out whether these kind of cultural heritage lead us to have a creative green economy, so that the young people have more value for their locations and their places. So these are a few examples that we have been working. But our aspiration is always that each individual cannot do much work, but if you can do collectively, so we can do some interesting things. And we always believe that with the power of community, we can challenge the system, or especially for the government, to make a change in the world. So thank you, Nane.
Thank you, Saurav. It's been really inspiring to hear about the work that StoryCycle has done, and especially the last cartoon that you've put up is something that I've not seen before. So thank you for that. I think, Saurav, one of the elements that stands out when we've had conversations in the past, and what you just spoke about, is some of the people-centric sort of design principles that StoryCycle implements across its projects and initiatives. And you just talked about the Dream City, that's one such example. So just if you could talk to us in the audience a little bit more about, what are these people-centric design principles that StoryCycle sort of keeps in mind and you work around when implementing or realizing projects and initiatives?
Yeah, so we have a few examples that while we are working on the Everest, at that time, we try to bring the story on the local perspective. So if anyone think about the Everest, most of the people think about how to climb on the top of the Everest. So people never think about that around the Everest, there is a community, there is a peoples, they have their own cultures, they have a different perspective towards the Everest. especially the local people, indigenous peoples, worship the mountains, right? And why they are agree to climb the mountain, because it depends on the economy. So the climbing is based on economy. So while we are talking to the local peoples, they are not really happy on climbing the Everest, right? So we bring those perspective as a people-centric perspective, and that perspective need to understand by the especially global north. So who are always eager to climb or win the environment, or win the natures. So similarly, this is a little big challenge, but the small thing is we are working on the city, and you see the technology is very user friendly. So while you are using mobiles, there is no any specific training to the user to give a users how to use a mobile. But while you are traveling or while you are working in the city is not very user centric. So we bring that conceptual idea that why not our city could be user friendly? Why the city planning is more into the car centric kind of things? Why they never come to us and ask what kind of city you are looking for, what are the aspirations for you to live on the cities. So this approach could be shifted, but how is we can do through this storytelling and digital mapping that brings you a lot of information from the users to the policymaker and the city planner. So that's why we make a central of our work principle is why not we focus on the people-centric design on our storytelling concept.
Thanks for that, Saurav. I think the Everest example is something that really resonates with a lot of, especially young people from the global north, as well as many of us who live in India. I think one of the questions that we have from the audience, Saurav, is essentially how are you able to balance those local perspectives or empower those local perspectives in then taking those to, let's say, city planning officials or a government official, or anybody who's sort of working on larger systemic change? How are you able to balance those narratives? How are you able to center the local perspectives?
So we try to not to manipulate the narrative from the locals. So I think I never try to balance it. So we never try to balance it. The system always try to balance it, or they try to articulate on their one perspective, one policies kind of things. But the people, so I always on the side of the citizens, because it doesn't mean that the one citizen saying something. So it's a collective informations, collective visions, collective data points that can be used by the city office or the planner or anyone who are in the power or who have a lot of resources. So the people-centric design concept is that you have to listen to the people as an first priority. That is the essential approach. But if you see in the practical aspect of the policy making or in the planning, so they never gives listening to people as an first priority, right? So they say that, okay, I listen to it. Okay, we have an expert, so we have everything. So we have policy maker. So they always overrule the people's voices by articulating different data, different manipulating informations. So one citizen cannot challenge those heavy data and informations. So we are more into the people side rather than into the policy and the government side while we're doing the stories and everything.
Thanks for that, Saurav. At CPI too, we're consistently pushing ourselves to prioritize listening, especially when we're talking about storytellers we're trying to do work on how do we center the voice of the storyteller themselves in the most authentic way. And also, if we're talking about storytelling and listening, like you said, what are the listening infrastructures that can be created so that government acts on it and the onus is on the government or the public officials, right, and not the citizens themselves. So thank you for bringing that up. Another question that we have from the audience, Saurav, is if you could tell us a little bit more. I think on your first slide, you mentioned behavioral change. So if you could tell us a little bit more about behavioral change and how it links with some of the participatory approaches that StoryCycle is taking forward.
So this behavioral change approach, we also realize later on. So when we have a COVID back in a few years back, that at the beginning, we are more into the collecting the informations or bringing the map points and putting in those information on the internet and say that we are enhancing the digital footprint kind of things. And while we're doing those activities, the local people start asking, so what? So what next? All the information on the internet. So all the voices are there, but what's happened next? Then we realized that it had to be shift somewhere. Those information, those stories has to be answer the questions of the Sohar. So then we try to rework on our model and trying to figure out that we can change some of the behavioral aspect of our work. So those informations, those stories, those data as only informations, unless it helped to change something positive impact on the society. So we try to use those informations in some kind of shifting change. One of the example that we have been working in promoting the local food, organic food and products that we have make a mechanism of using the blockchain's technology. So we bring the stories on different part of the production site and link with the market, and the people try to figure out that whether all the informations we bring from the production sites to the customers, so the customers will get the informations about their harvest cycles, and especially for the food mile. For examples, we also produce apple in our mountain, and we try to promote you can eat apple from your one country rather than the apple from the US, because you can calculate the food mile, and that leads to your that gives right decisions to the customers. So those kind of food miles calculations give a lot of behavior change of the consumer, that we can consider the environment, we can consider everything. So why not we calculate the food mile before we eat anything?
Thank you for that. Saurav, I think a final question before we open it up to other panelists, Saurav, is often, and this is coming from experience at CPI as well, when we're thinking about public participation, storytelling is a powerful element that comes out, especially when we're talking about complex governance systems like those in Asia and the global South or majority world. And so we wanted to know if you could share some of StoryCycle's, maybe learnings or reflections. So when you've attempted to embed some of these participatory approaches like storytelling, like listening, what have been some of your learnings and reflections when taking those forward to government officials or other sort of major players when you're thinking about policy change? And the learning, again, doesn't have to be that the project was successful, right? And we've talked about this at CPI. We have something called failing forward. So whether it's a failure, whether it's a success, it's a learning. So if you could share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the good thing is the young people is very fascinating with this technology, like mapping, storytelling, using mobile device, making a TikTok and everything, right? So that's a very strong part that we can motivate young people to engage different tools and explore their voices through those kind of platforms. But obviously, the government is not happy with those tools and techniques. So recently, in the last week, the government banned the TikTok in Nepal. And they have a lot of concerns using on Twitter and other social media because of the different kind of content, and they are not happy for that. So why I'm taking this as a case, because we are also trying to give tools to the young people or the people who have fewer access to the technology and the tools. So we capacitate citizens on that aspect, and there are a lot of contents they produce. So we are not controlling on the content, right? So this is right, this is wrong. So government has a lot of headache on those kind of filtering those content, one thing. But some of the good example that we have been working on the different cities, especially focusing on the promoting the heritage sites. So because we have an earthquake few years back, and we still are not able to rebuild those monuments on following the cultural heritage protocols. So those questions we have been raising on those specific areas. So government is taking very serious note on that. So after we bringing those stories from the crowdsourcing method and the heritage sites, so government realized that, okay, we are doing wrong. So, okay, we will be rectified with the culture things. So these things is happening in certain sector of the government system, but they are very concerned about the public opinion and the political agendas kind of things. So yeah, that is my learning so far.
Thank you so much, Saurav. This was really helpful, and I'm sure a lot of us have a lot to learn from the work that StoryCycle is doing. And thank you for taking the time out. We'll be moving on to our next panelist now, Vaani. But again, we'll have questions coming in through the chat box, and we'll also request folks to, other panelists to unmute themselves and ask a question. We would now like to invite Sayonee from Vaani. Hi, Sayonee.
Hi, Anugnya.
Good morning.
And before we go ahead, I would like to thank Saurav, because there are so many synergies and I'm so excited. And the last bit of banning TikTok is absolutely another synergy between us in India and Nepal. So yeah, pretty much a lot of context is similar. So thanks.
Thank you, Shani. Great. I think we'll start off with you giving us an introduction about the wonderful work that Vaani has been doing.
Thanks, Anugnya. Yeah, hi everyone. So when the three keywords are here, right here, which essentially describes what Vaani does, and they are community, technology, and development. Interestingly, storytelling is not here, but I'll come that how it is a very instrumental aspect of how we work with the community. But yeah, I just want to reiterate again the fact that we are here for the community, and we are pretty much off and by the community as well. We can move ahead. Sorry, Anugni, you'll have to press a couple of more times because there are texts which are not coming right ahead. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, so basically in India, so we work primarily in India, although we work also in a couple of places in Ethiopia, and our technology has also been deployed in Afghanistan and places like that. But our core focus is working in the rural segment of India with underserved and marginalized
I think we have lost Shani. Shani, if you're there, we couldn't hear you.
I am. Am I not audible?
Now you are. We think we
Oh,
lost you in the middle.
oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, technology. Quote unquote. Yeah, so I was saying that the technology basically aids, participation from the community. It's kind of the platforms are created and aided by technology in such ways where their voices reach the other side of the spectrum and each other as well. So if we can say that we are communities based out of other different rural parts of India, so the voices reach each other as well. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. So the reason why we thought that we are here and we should be here. So one is, of course, when we speak about rural communities in India, there's a lot of issues around access, and that access start right from digital platforms, right? So access to mobile, access to smart devices, access to internet, and access to a lot of information that are critical for any of us, right? So what are our entitlements, what are our rights, information related to health, agriculture, education, history, you can just name it. That is one of the reason that there are lack of channels, as a result of which there are low awareness. And even when there are channels, they are almost most of the time they're non-inclusive. So for example, if there is of course a lot of information on YouTube as well, for example, but is the local population able to access YouTube? Because they do not have the internet facilities, they do not have the smart devices, or even the language and the context of information. So if I am from a rural region of one of the state in India, my agriculture method is not going to be, generic or at similar to other parts of rural India. So those kind of context is most of the time missing. So the local context, local language, there are dialects also, and that's what we try to, these are the gaps that we try to bridge through the work that we are doing via these tech platforms, and we call them community media platforms. And I'll come to why we call them community media platforms. The media that we are referring to here are not the mainstream, conventional media, but this media is basically owned by the community, and and the articulation over there are of theirs. So yeah, we can move ahead to the next slide. So this is our theory of change, that we source information from the community through storytelling, through content that I'll come to later. We also, kind of give the community the information back, and we essentially close the loop and work as a bridge. And we believe that these kind of spaces of participation, of conversation, can actually bring about and encourage change. We can go to the next one. Yeah, this is where probably I'd explain it a bit. So these are the 5 critical elements of the work that we do. One is, of course, accessible tech. And how is that? Because we have several technological platforms. So for example, we are voice first. That means that all the information that we provide are through audio. So that is possible only when we are also available on simple mobile devices, not the smart ones, right? The key press one, because a significant population in India have access to, still access to only those kind of devices and not the smart ones. And especially if we speak about women, they don't have access to, most of the rural women do not have access to smart devices and internet. So the technology becomes important because it is available over non-smart devices, non-internet user. The second one is contextual content, which I'm going to speak about more also. Uh, so when we say that we want to do a campaign on, say, maternal dietary diversity, right? And now if I say that, in your food group, you need to have kiwi, or you need to have rice, But there are population in India who do not have rice, or who do not, kiwi is not one of the fruits that they know. So when I'm basically going to the community, it's very important first to understand from them what are the existing practices, prevalent norms, behaviors. Only with that we can create contextual content, and only with contextual content we can ensure that the community is participating, the community is owning the platform up. It is not a platform of Gramvani, it is a platform of the community. Gramvani is there just as an element to put nudges and provide further information when asked for. uh, so we do in the community, we work with community champions whom we train. They are from the community, there are ears and there are eyes and there are also the mouth, I'd say. uh, and the two other elements are partnership, of course, like we are speaking here. Collaborations are very very important, because there is no point working one in silo and two replicating without any purpose. So if someone else is doing something good, it makes sense that we use that offering a service as a plug-in to the system of what we are working. So that partnership with the ecosystem, be it with private sector players or the government, or or even with like local influencers, the elected representatives, teachers, health workers. So these are very critical, so that what we are doing is not kind of only focused in one of the point, but we essentially connecting all the dots that are available and facilitated exchange of information, exchange of perspectives, is what basically this entire model thrives on. We can go to the next one. So these are the channels that the technology platforms that we work on. So IVR is non-smartphone, no internet. It's on feature phone, whereby a person, there's a 10-digit callback number. A person calls over there. It's pan India. The call gets disconnected, and the person gets a call back. And after getting a call back, there's a playlist which can be listened to. So one function is listening to the information, two is recording myself. So as an user, I can record my question, my experience, my opinion, which again will be put back onto the platform so that other persons can listen to it, react to it, kind of uh, converse, create a conversation of the topics, right? So it's peer to peer sharing and influence. That is very critical, and that makes this entire thing participatory. Then there are other functionalities like bookmarking, forwarding, rapid surveys or quizzes can also be conducted, and we do conduct those kind of things to gather either quantitative or qualitative inputs from the community, and we definitely feed it back to the community. It's a very critical aspect of our model, right? We do not keep it with ourselves only. The other channels are, of course, internet based app, because we are realizing that a lot of youth segment is slowly shifting to the internet and smart devices. And then, of course, WhatsApp and chatbots. So WhatsApp is basically more one-to-one, and it is initiated for conversation where you'd like a one-to-one conversation, like on sexual and reproductive health and rights, right? So where I do not want to hear it from others, I do not even want my identity to be revealed on the platform. So it is a more one-to-one service, replicating, of course, the model of conversation and participation. And of course, there are chatbots which are AI and ML enabled, as in when I speak, that gets translated into text if that is required, or when I speak in some one language, it gets translated to Hindi. So there are those kind of nudges and those kind of plugins that we are also working on. And these are some of the things that you can do, like I said: listen, record, share, read, type, discover, and voice surveys. And all of the interaction with the users get recorded through a data visualization BI, whereby we understand, we get feedback that okay, something is working, something is not working, something is working outside our expectation, etc., etc. So yeah, we can go ahead. So this is basically to explain that these kind of model, and we use this kind of model in multiple ways. One of the ways, like, local, when I say community media, so one of the ways geo-specific. So for example, I stay in Shimla, and I would there will be a platform, there is a platform which is only Shimla centric, which means that everything that is happening in and around Shimla, or it can be even smaller administrative, blocks or panchayats. So whatever is happening in my panchayat is captured in this platform. And that makes it geo-specific. Thematic platforms, like I give an example of sexual and reproductive health and rights is a theme. Same people can be on both the platform, but one is hyper local information and news, the other one is thematic information and news. And of course there are organizations and partners who kind of take up the entire model and kind of use it for their purpose, which are the sponsored platforms. We can go to the next. Yeah, these are some of the data about, kind of our outreach. We are right now present in 105 districts in India. And we receive around, our platforms receive around 1.25 lakh unique calls from unique callers on an average. And you can see that who are our principal user with a monthly disposable income of approximately 2000 INR or less. We do have community champions, like I said. So they are our volunteers. We have trained almost 1,000 plus volunteers. We have trained more, but 1,000 plus is existing with us right now, of whom 70% are youth and 30% are women and girls. We can go to the next. Yeah, thank you. I'll take a pause here, and if there are questions, please go ahead asking them.
Thanks, Sayonee. We've been reading so much about Vaani and following the work that you do so closely, especially the part where you have so many narratives and just stories, authentic stories that are listed on the website. I've heard some of them about, stories of like just friendship, conflict between two individuals that just called up and recorded, and it's been really great. Before asking you a question, I'll actually see if any of the other panelists have any reflections or questions, or if there's an audience.
Thanks, Stuart. It means Gram means rural, and Vani, like I said, we are voice first. So Vani exactly means voices. So rural voices or voices from the villages is what Gram Vani means.
Great. Okay, one of the other questions that we have, and actually some questions are coming in personally, some are coming in separately. So one of the questions that we've received, Sayonee, is essentially the challenges of sort of thinking about technology-driven storytelling and how that's continuing to preserve the authenticity or the cultural sort of nuance of the narrative itself, right? So how is Ramvani able to navigate that? So yeah, I can elaborate if needed.
Yeah. So see, I mean, technology, the technology is just there uh, to kind of ensure and enable that, a way more larger outreach, which is often not possible for high touch, models, can be reached. And because it exists, we haven't brought about mobile technology, for example. So it's a potent way, because of the penetration that can be used to reach out to a large number of people. There are, of course, certain things that will not be possible over it, right? There will be many other things that are possible over it, and that is what we concentrate on. So it is not rather a technology driven storytelling. I'd say it's a participatory platform where storytelling basically act as the nudge to, so for example, if I want to know that what are my entitlements, and I ask that question to Madam Anogna, who is an expert on entitlement. So you just answer it. You don't have to tell a story because it is clear and straightforward. But if I want to do a campaign on child marriage or dowry, so a behavior change campaign on social aspect, simply saying that dowry is illegal and don't take it is not going to cut it. All of us know it, right? So in that case, we will first need to know from the community that why do you think dowry even today exists? And that is when, with those information, yes, then we need to create a story around it. That story will be based in that context. That story will have a character that can influence that community, and that story, more importantly, needs to take a pause at a critical juncture for the community to reflect and then create story out of it. So for example, when we see forum theaters or street theaters, at least in Indian context, we see that they take a pause at a critical juncture. What should Shayoni do after this is the bit that is going to come from the community, and that can be anything. That can be absolutely non-conducive towards our ulterior motive of saying that, people need to see why dowry is not fine, how can this be reduced. It can go completely a different way. People can say no, dowry is still fine. I am a girl, I don't, there's a law on property ownership of girl, I still don't get access to it, I'm fine, I'll take a dowry. Absolutely fine. That space, that safe space, that conversation is very important to create the entire narrative. It cannot be a one-sided narrative coming from any of the side. So that is what the tech platform that we use essentially enable us to host and facilitate this exchange and conversation. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you for that. Um,
Uh,
Shani, Keshav is coming in with a question as well.
yeah, thanks, Anugnya. Shani is super, super interesting. And something that I wanted to touch upon was, um, and I've always been intrigued by what stops governments and the public sector per se to move to these approaches, right? Because they are approaches which brings out the voices of the vulnerable to the fore. They tell exactly how people are feeling. But if you talk about what at least our local governments are doing, they're still stuck in the age-old way of doing sample surveys and just collecting some data points on how uh, policies have worked. What's stopping them from doing it? Because mobile penetration and internet penetration has increased manifold in the last decade or so, and it's only nice to hear what people are saying who you are trying to serve. So do you have any reflections or experience on this part of it, like what's not letting them build these type of listening infrastructures?
Yeah, thanks, Kes. To actually see, it's not that they're absolutely. I'd say it's not a one-sided story per se, because we have worked with government departments, agencies, the SRLMs, which are the livelihood missions, departments in India, rural livelihood mission. We have worked with them. They have adopted our technology. They have actually, during the COVID, that was the only way they could interact with their beneficiaries, or with their communities. So they a lot of them are interested, a lot of them are working. I remember we did a campaign on elected women representative, because there is a huge how is it in India? I mean, they are often the women elected representatives are often thought of as being useless, because it is their pati or their husband or any other male associate who actually runs. They are just the face of it, and they run the entire. So we got approached, we did a campaign on kind of initiating a conversation in the community of what can change this perspective, what is their perspective, etc., etc. So it's not that they are absolutely uninterested. There are people who are interested, but I'd say by and large it still depends on interested individuals, rather it being a systematic or systemic way of intervening, right? And over there, I believe that there are certain, nuances to this entire model. Although it is moderated, whatever I say as a user or record as a user might get it gets moderated and then it gets put back on the platform. But there's a huge risk of this being swayed by someone. So if there is a political campaign, it will be absolutely one sided. So it is not only the government, I believe it is also us who needs to be careful of how this tool can be used. Ultimately, this model is a tool, right? I mean, it is a way. So this can be used in several ways. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a very good. It can be a very good tool in the hands of the government to source information from the community and put it back there. But at the same time, I think both us and not only Gramvani, all of the ecosystem, and the other side needs to be very careful of how these tools can be used. And I believe that that will emerge with multiple uses of this tool. It is not all on the horizon. Those kind of nooks and those kind of challenges and plugins to tackle them will have to emerge with the context. Thank you. Thanks, Keshav.
Thank you for that, Shani. We have just one more question in the chat, in the Q&A, and then we can move on to the next panelist. Somebody has just asked if there's a difference between the mode that Gramvani has versus the radio, and if you could just elucidate the difference.
So radio is essentially, see, unless and until there are live sessions, initiated from the side of the radio, it is one-sided, right? It is like you just listen to whatever is being played. This platform, it is the ideal balance that we strive for, and somewhere we reach is that 80% of the content are going to be coming from the community, and only 20% will go from Gramvani side, and their nudges, they are nudges to make the community speak more, participate more, because again, the entire model is dependent on the fact that peer-to-peer sharing, peer-to-peer learning is a very critical aspect, rather than being preachy, please wear a mask before entering, for example, during COVID. Doesn't even cut it unless and until I say that maybe I'm from the community, that I have a child who is suffering from asthma, so I'd request you, my friend, to wear a mask to kind of help yourself prevent being infected from the infection. It carries a lot of value when it is within the community. So that space for exchange is what makes it different than radio, because over radio you can only listen, not contribute essentially.
Thank you so much, Vaani, and for talking us through the incredible work that Gramvani has been doing. We'll get back to you a little bit later during the webinar. We would now like to invite Tripti from 60 Decibels, and Keshav, over to you.
Thanks, Anugnya. Well, Tripti, over to you. We'd love to know more about the interesting work 60 Decibels is doing. I've personally experienced a lot of the organization's work. Let's hear more about it from Tripti.
Thanks, Keshav. I will be using lots of slides today and showing data, so I hope everyone's had their coffee and is ready to look at numbers. So briefly about 60 Decibels, for those of you who may not have heard of us, we're an end-to-end impact measurement organization that uses remote phone-based surveys to get high-quality end customer or end beneficiary social impact outcomes data. So in simple words, we pick up the phone and call people and try to understand in their own words what their lived experience is using the product, service, or participating in the intervention. We work across multiple sectors, including financial inclusion, agriculture, health, quality jobs, and continue to expand our sort of exposure in these sectors. And we worked in over 80 plus countries. I know that number keeps inching up, so it might be higher than 80 today, but just, a huge sort of expansive network of enumerators and surveyors allow us to actually participate and work in all these countries around the world. Next slide, please. So why do we do what we do? Our goal is to listen to the people who our clients are serving so their voices can be heard and brought to the decision-making table. So we use this data to then benchmark our clients' performance and show how they compare to other peers in the industry or sectors, and then allow them to learn, adjust, and hopefully improve their impact at the end beneficiary and customer level. We work with a variety of clients around the world, including impact investors, funds, foundations, sometimes social enterprises directly, and sometimes also governments and other regulatory bodies. Next slide, please. So here's, oh, sorry, we can go to the next one. Here is a global map that shows you the breadth of our work. So we worked with over 1,200 clients, 1,200 clients in 80 countries spanning the globe. We have teams in the US, LATAM, Kenya, India, and the UK. And these are basically based to be in close proximity to the work that we do. And like I mentioned previously, we have a global network of over 1,300 research assistants who help us conduct interviews in often local and hyperlocal languages. Next slide, please. So how does all of this work? We spent nearly a decade fine-tuning our remote data collection methodology to deliver not just a good experience and actionable insights for our clients, but also the end respondent who we are talking to, and making sure that this is not an extractive process for them and they're finding value in the data that they're sharing with us. So here are a few numbers that will explain how we measure impact at 60 decibels. So the first number is 275 respondents. That is a typical sample size that our research assistants call and speak to per organization. Of course, it varies depending on kind of what the entire population size is, but roughly this number helps us give a high level of confidence and a low level of margin error, meaning that the data is truly representative of the population. Most of our surveys last less than 15 minutes, and this is what I was referring to in terms of making sure this is not an extractive process for the person who's giving us their time and kind of picking up the phone and talking to us. Our surveys are a combination of quantitative and qualitative data, and I'll be covering a lot of the sort of differences and value of each of those approaches. And typically there are anything between 20 to 30 questions, sometimes longer, depending on what we're trying to understand. And then we work quite fast. So I know the monitoring and evaluation space is infamous for being incredibly cumbersome, taking a lot of time doing surveys. So what we have tried to do is make sure that that we're getting data for our clients quickly so they can act on it. So within 12 to 16 weeks, we're able to share results with our clients. Back to you, Keshav. That's sort of just briefly about 60 decibels and how we work.
Oh, neat. Thanks, Tripti, for taking us through the interesting work that 60 Decibels has been doing. And what I love about the organization is that this has always been an Achilles heel for a lot of grassroots, organizations, one of which I was also a part of how to work with lean data methodologies and how to cull out information that is not only an age-old evaluation study that takes years and crores of fund to administer, but it's something which tells you how your program is working and how is it helping or not helping, what aspects need improvement in a very quick manner. And I think that's where I believe 60 decibels add a lot of value to the sector. So kudos for that. I had a follow-up question on 60 decibels work. Now, a lean data approach is something which organizations can use for a multitude of factors and reasons and approaches. So, and you have worked with a lot of clients across the world. So, what has been their bias or their intent of doing these surveys or doing these studies? Is it mostly related to impact measurement? Is it mostly related to designing programs? Do they want to hear what people are thinking? Do they want to just test out how their programs are working? And I know a split is a difficult word for this, but what is this approach being used for presently, and how do you see this shaping up in the months and years to come?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Keshav. And I would say that because we have a wide variety of clients, right? Like I said, impact investors, foundations, sometimes social enterprises directly, or governments, the intended desire to undertake an activity like this often varies. And so, they're some of the most forward-thinking organizations, typically foundations, who have been in the philanthropic space for decades and are curious to understand where is all the how is all the money creating impact, and if not, how can we learn from the data and course correct, pivot, and improve the impact that we want to be having the end beneficiaries or customers experiencing. And so there's certainly organizations for whom it is impact first, and their desire in gathering this data is simply to do a better job with respect to creating impact. But then there are also organizations that do it from a accountability perspective. And so very often funders, impact investors, and everyone really is accountable to their donor or accountable to another stakeholder that has put in either money or time and effort in supporting them with launching this particular product, service, or intervention. And so they are almost obliged to kind of show the impact of that undertaking after a particular time. I do think that even those who come in with, gosh, we just have to do it because we've been asked to do it, end up finding value in the data and are willing to then kind of do this in a more routine and higher cadence, with a higher cadence. So that would be the second group of people. And I think the third group of people are social enterprises. So social enterprises or organizations that have a mix between their impact thesis as well as their sort of business priorities. And oftentimes both those are interlinked. And so if you have satisfied customers who are using a subsidized solar home system, for example, you are also likely having customers who are experiencing a high quality of impact in their lives. And so they are interested in improving their business, but by virtue of improving their business and the service or offering they're providing, they are also improving the impact at that end beneficiary and customer level. So I would say there's a variety of reasons organizations undertake impact measurement exercises. But often I think they all find value in the data beyond simply their initial intention when they approached us or anyone else to go and collect impact data. I don't know if I answered your question entirely, Keshav.
Mostly it did. Thanks, Tripti. I also have a question from the chat where Susan is asking, how does one take numbers and make it interesting for storytelling, especially for dry academic surveys? Well, okay. Over to you, Tripti.
Thanks, Susan. That's a very good question. I think having data be distilled in a manner that's standardized, consistent, and scalable is very important for all stakeholders involved, not just the end beneficiary, but also the person who has sought out data. Because if you can't understand the data, especially impact data, I mean, the capital markets are famous for having KPIs, performance metrics, etc., that are easily understandable for everyone. Unfortunately, the impact sector is a little bit behind with respect to having that data be standardized, consistent, and sort of comparable across impact organizations. And so one of the things is making sure that you know who you want to listen to. Before you start a survey, you have to identify who is the end beneficiary who is supposed to be benefiting from this particular product, service, or intervention. And then the second question that needs to be answered is, how do we want to measure the impact, right? So do we want to do it over the phone? Do we want to do in-person surveys? All of these have a variety of pros and cons associated with them. The third is, what do you want to be asking them? Do you want to be asking about the experience, the impact, understanding the demographics of that group? All these three things are important, but essential to establish before you go and gather that data. And then lastly, and this I think Susan will answer your question directly, is how do we do it in a systematic way so that the reader of a report can understand? This is where you ask the same questions again, standardize the question, and hopefully present data that's actually actionable rather than simply telling a story that isn't necessarily going to be helpful for anyone. I think we all like anecdotes and we all like quotations, but how do you distill qualitative data, for example, into how do you code it, how do you present it in numbers, how can it be adding color to the quantitative data that's been gathered? All are questions that you kind of ask before you run a study so that the end result, the end output is easy for the reader to understand and actionable, most importantly.
Great. Thanks, Tripti. We have another chat piece. So this is more to do with the indices that the indices that 60 Decibels has been working on, and how are they helping out organizations, and how can they help out? Because as I understand, this is now macro data coming from multiple organizations, multiple regions. If you could elaborate that.
Yeah, Keshav, I have some slides that will help sort of explain all of that. Akshay, can we pull up the presentation again? And then I'll be using the example of our most recent initiative called the Microfinance Index run by 60 Decibels. I'll just wait for the slides because there's a lot of numbers that might be hard to follow without. Yes, thank you so much. So when I was talking about listening in a standardized and consistent manner at scale to those whose lives are supposed to be impacted, this is a perfect example of sort of putting all of that together. So the 60 Decibels Microfinance Index provides high quality, comparable impact data for the microfinance industry. And we do this across other industries also, but I will be using this particular example. And the data that I'm going to be showing you is entirely driven by client voices. And by clients here, I mean the end borrower of credit that the financial service providers in the microfinance industry are providing. So if you go to the next slide, this is the slide that talks about the who and how. And while I was answering Susan's question, I mentioned it is critical to establish who you're talking to really gather data that's important and impactful. And so when we did the microfinance index last year or spanning into even this year, we spoke to over 32,000 clients, so people who borrowed or took out a loan. And these 32,000 respondents were clients of 114 financial service providers across 32 countries, across Latin, Africa, and Asia. We conducted phone interviews with all of them, and we did them in 92 languages to make sure that we were really speaking to, sort of vulnerable communities. And often, they don't speak English, and we kind of really have to make sure that we're going in and talking to them in languages that they're comfortable speaking with, and so on. And the average length of the survey conducted was about 20 minutes. And the average response rate was 54%. So in essence, the 60 Decibels approach is razor focus on listening to the single most important stakeholder, right? And in this case, it's the ultimate borrower. Of course, the MFI industry has a lot of data on, the challenges that MFI institutions are facing or the financial service providers are facing, or, all sorts of things. But the ultimate borrower whose lives these investors and MFIs are supposed to be impacting, that voice is often missing. And so our hope and desire with this effort was to bring the end borrowers' voices to the decision-making tables. So in this context, this is how we determine the who and how we should be listening when we try to measure impact. So the second thing that we do with indices or all of our work is to establish what we want to be asking them. Akshay, next slide, please. So in order to measure impact that is holistic, comparable, and actionable, we need to be asking questions that actually matter, and we need to be asking them in a systematic and standardized way. So for the MFI index, we covered a variety of dimensions, all the way from access, impact to experience. And so I won't get into the details, but access is about who the MFIs are actually reaching. And so are they truly reaching vulnerable communities or not? The business impact section or dimension is about the loan's impact on the respondents' business income, or kind of how they're able to improve their business activities. The household impact is, again, the impact on the respondents' quality of life or their families. For example, is their ability, because of this loan, is their ability to spend money on education for their children or healthcare or food improved? And then client protection is an important one that helps us understand whether borrowers are subject to predatory practices, right? So the MFI institutions have been infamous in certain countries for, giving out loans at very high interest rates, and not really, that tends to not just diminish the impact, but often worsen someone's quality of life in order to sort of meet those payments. And then lastly, resilience and agency is about the ability of respondents to bounce back from a financial shock, and sort of how the loan is improving their their agency. That could be confidence, that could be autonomy within the household or within the community. So the index in this case allowed us to basically at an industry level standardize critical data in a meaningful way, which is then comparable across countries, across different dimensions of impact, satisfaction, and access. And finally, for the microfinance sector, have data that's based on the lived experiences of the end beneficiaries, rather than simply sort of output data that we are often used to relying on in measuring impact. So I'm going to use one example of real data. Actually, can we go to the next slide, please? To kind of put together some of the things I've been talking about. So after establishing the who, what, and how, I want to present an example of how data is actually usable, right? And so in this case, we asked questions around the individual household and business level, and we asked them to sort of the borrowers. Because we asked the same questions across all 32,000 surveys and received data from even the companies about the additional services they provided, we were able to segment the data and answer the question about what kind of loan is most impactful, right? So you typically think of a loan that's just credit, but very often financial service providers either bundle that, well, they could either provide credit simply, which is, often done, but they could also bundle the loan with non-financial services. So you'll see the dark purple is the just credit only loan. The dark red on the right is the credit bundle with non-financial services, which could be simply education of how to use the money or how to use sort of the credit they were being provided. The light purple or the light red below the dark red is bundling the credit with other financial services. So for example, offering a savings scheme or an insurance scheme. And then the light purple is credit bundled with both financial and non-financial services. So, if I could draw your attention to the chart, as you see across all 5 metrics, confidence, ability to manage finances, income, quality of life, and savings, which are potential outcomes we want to be measuring for the borrowers, you will see that the light purple line is sort of, unequivocally the longest line across all these metrics. So what this means is that the most impactful loan is one that bundles credit with access to other financial services and non-financial services. For example, a loan that is also providing a savings scheme, and in addition to that, providing training that helps you understand the savings scheme effectively. So that is the kind of loan that is most impactful across all of the metrics that we wanted to gather. And so I use this example to sort of draw your attention to how data is actually valuable and actionable if from the very start we identify who, what, how, and do it in a standardized and scalable manner. And this is just one example of how our indices kind of try to gather data at a sectoral level or a regional level and whatnot.
Neat. That's really helpful, Tripti. Thanks, Tripti, for sharing the index part as well, because that takes stuff to the second order. Cognizant of time, I'd now be moving to our friends from Jerita, Ima and Stefan. Over to you two folks to talk about the amazing work your organization has been doing over the years, and then we'll get into a quick discussion. Welcome, Stefan and Ima.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
Great to
Thank
be
you so
here.
much, Keshav.
Go ahead.
Stephen,
Ima.
go ahead. Sorry.
So, not to change the mood music too much, we've heard so many really inspiring projects that use storytelling in different ways. I see, in this room, we're a bit more traditional. So if we could go to the first slide. We see storytelling as the first empathy technology. So technology meaning process. So from the beginning of time, people have gathered around fires or others and listened and learned from each other. This to us is sometimes lost in our over digitalized world. So ours is all about that contact and storytelling being that first empathy technology and the source. Next slide. Go ahead, Ima.
So what happens when a Canadian, British, Iraqi Jew and a Japanese, Indonesian Muslim, a Pakistani, Canadian, British Muslim walk into a cafe? Charita happens. So the three of us, Abdulrahim, who can't be with us today because it's in the middle of the night in New Haven, the three of us met actually in New Haven and literally in a cafe. And we talked about some of the issues that were happening. The Indonesian Muslim, of course, is me. We're having a conversation with both Abdulrahim and Stephen. And both of them have had experience in Indonesia as well. They've done projects in Indonesia, as Stephen mentioned earlier. The work that he does on interfaith has brought him to Indonesia before, as well as Abdulrahim. So one of the things that we were trying to talk about a problem that we were seeing in Indonesia, and it was about how conversations have shifted. There was deep polarization among communities. It was triggered by elections. It was lots of misinformation, disinformation. And we felt, how do we get back to that human connection, talking about stories to understand each other better, about talking about inclusivity, talking about ensuring that we are actually having that dialogue before we even get online. So what happens is cerita. And cerita in Bahasa Indonesia, in Indonesian, means story. So that's kind of why cerita. There's a longer story of why it's called cerita as well. Our team was very in Indonesia was very creative, and cerita was an acronym for community empowerment for raising inclusivity and trust through technology application. And we wanted this to be used then when we do use technology, be it social media, be it anything that we do. It has to start with that human connection first. The next slide.
So for us, we so many people are doing storytelling these days, or taking aspects of it, talking about stories, and we'll see the huge NGOs tell these stories of the people on the ground. What we're focusing on, and I've seen how the panel is the same, is focusing on the storyteller themselves, not taking the story from the storyteller, but very much allowing them to tell their stories. These three elements, the three of us coming together, had peace building, theater and the arts, and me with dialogue. And over time, we started in 2017. Over time, we see very much that it is dialogue through storytelling. And in this, and we'll talk about our pedagogy later, it's very much about that connection and that listening, as well as telling stories. Next slide.
So Charita is essentially, it's a capacity building program. So what we do is, how we initially started was training community leaders to tell their stories, to how you use, in short, it's storytelling for good, storytelling for peace, storytelling to get back to that discussion. So empowering the change makers to engage with stories, building empathy. And this is something that we saw in the program that we did. Our initial pilot was in Indonesia. We started in 5 cities in Indonesia, and in each city we trained 30 people. And these 30 people then went into the world, went into Indonesia. So from 5 cities, turned to 14 cities, and then from 150 people to more than 3,000 people that were trained. And they brought the tools, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about our method and pedagogy. It's bringing this conversation deep. It's oftentimes it's like, oh, we don't want to talk about the political stuff, or we don't want to. In Indonesia, for example, we try to avoid talking about race, religion, and it's something that, it's like, oh, let's not go there. We actually wanted people to, let's go there, let's talk about it, but in a safe space, how to create those safe spaces, and how to facilitate those difficult conversations. Because if you can't have those difficult conversations offline, you're not going to be able to bring that online into social media. And oftentimes that's what creates the polarization. And this was this is what was happening in 2016, 2017, when we were having these discussions. We saw that this is what was happening in Indonesia, elections, splitting families, splitting communities apart, and having these capacity building programs in each of these cities really brought out those conversations. And we let it grow organically in how we didn't prescribe how they would use these tools within their communities. We saw them take it forward. We saw them let it have organic kind of developments, innovations. We had participants coming from 2 very different communities come together and cross-train each other's communities, do Muslim communities with Christian communities. We had one of the participants use her, she was a fashion designer, how she used the fashion design to use to use her craft for storytelling, to tell a story about Indonesia, to tell the story about what it means to be a community. And how this then connected to policymakers. There were a lot of people who were already part of community leaders who had the ears of a lot of policymakers or public officials, who then were able to have those conversations. So having those conversations and bringing them back into having those discussions and dialogues were really essential for us, having that human connection.
Next slide. I guess it's important to say that whilst we started with the community leaders, we quickly went beyond to people leading youth clubs, to young teachers, to tutors, and others, as well as if it's social media influencers and such like that. It should be said that at the time, and our first basically 2 installments, we were funded by google.org and then by Meta Facebook. But very much it was clear that we were getting more traction, it being an analog program that used technology as a communication tool, but really on the ground. what's always been important to us, and there is to counter that polarization by building this middle space, this third space, which I think most of us are in, but often are not organized around. So what we found with building this program is that the participants actually became a new community within that middle that could bring each other into their own family communities, if you will, to humanize, to connect. I'll just go on to the next slide that describes our pedagogy. So we use storytelling, Marshall Gantz's public narrative approach from the Harvard Kennedy School, as well as theater, the oppressed. Someone mentioned it earlier. And all of this comes around identity exploration using what others have named it interworldview, intercultural, interfaith, but really interworldview. What are the different experiences and identities that create your worldview that bring you together? So in places where we've been working, be it over the past 2 years, we've been working in Sri Lanka and Ethiopia and Bangladesh and Pakistan, and I'm missing one key one. The conversation is so pregnant around specific identities, and here we allow people to come into the room with those identities, but quite quickly using our work around identity exploration and interworldview, it becomes much more complicated, which is what we really want to show. Next slide. That's you, Ima.
So that's the idea. I mean, it started in Indonesia with Cerita, but we saw that Stephen and Abdulrahim, since we did it in Indonesia, have also brought it to the UK, to Amsterdam, and other places as well. And we thought that we saw this, and we saw how wherever we did it, they then grew different communities. So we thought this is, again, we want people to start having those shared experiences. So the caravan, actually, we decided to call it the caravan, and now we're trying to grow the caravan as well. Having those shared experiences of going through the methods and using the tools, building that culture of storytelling, using storytelling for participatory democracy, for participatory decision making, and so again, right now we're working very closely with the Indonesian government, for example, on the Ministry of Villages, to use storytelling as a method to get to ensure that participatory decision making actually happens within villages. Oftentimes this doesn't happen, and we bring the methods, and as Stephen has already explained, the pedagogy is flexible. We don't use the same methods, we don't use the same tools everywhere, but we see what's needed. And in our recent conversations with the Indonesian government, it is seen, again, I think someone had mentioned it, I think it was Saurav in the first, as the first presenter talked about listening, a lack of sufficient listening infrastructure as a major roadblock in mainstreaming participatory approaches. I thought that was so profound in the sense that, yes, listening, because when you're just focusing on storytelling as a storytelling and not bringing in a whole training of a whole training module from central government into the villages, you don't capture what is needed in these sub-districts or villages, and you end up missing out what is actually needed in these more remote areas outside of the capital. In the conversation that we recently Keshav and I have, we often talk about our countries in the context of our capitals. We talk about Jakarta, we talk about Kuala Lumpur and Manila, and we talk about Bangkok, we talk about Delhi. we often forget that there are other cities that may not be as developed or not as connected, and are easily, because of proximity to central, to the capital city, you have more conversations, and you end up getting more resources. How do you enable other places that are more remote to have these conversations? And oftentimes when we speak to them, it's like, it's the response that that you often get from people in remote areas in Indonesia is an answer that doesn't suffice central government in terms of trying to provide. So often the answers come out of fear or out of pride. It's like, what is it that you need in your village? It's like, no, we don't need anything. We're really good. We're doing really well. Or they say their answer is out of fear. They say, no, sir, we don't need anything. We're not going to need anything. So if you come with an approach like that, so that's why when we brought this, we brought our storytelling method and narratives into to the ministry, they were quite intrigued because we wanted to bring it to them. How do we have conversations? How do you have dialogue with these village heads to allow them to actually voice out their needs? What is it that they need, so that resources then can be allocated? So that's kind of the idea that we're having. It's also interesting, some of the conversations that we've been having on how we're growing the caravan as well is, again, alternative energy companies who want to do sustainable energy, or bring in sustainability into villages. They don't know how to communicate because they, again, as Stephen had mentioned, we focus on the storyteller. Oftentimes these companies are very good at explaining their technology, but are not perhaps equipped to tell the community, this is what you need. Because they just come and it's like, hey, this is what you need, instead of asking, what is it that you need for your village to be able to be sustainable? So it's these types of conversations, and we really feel that storytelling and the methods that we've been using are bringing those voices out. So next slide.
Yeah, so the country that I hadn't mentioned was Cameroon, I believe. And it's interesting thinking about them because we work on a train the trainer method, either at for civil society organizations or direct with the influencers. Cameroon's a great example of, here's a toolbox of different methods and use it your way. So they used a storytelling method for trauma healing around the Anglophone crisis that they've been experiencing. So I think it's really important to say that, this is not a top-down approach. We always work with partners on the ground to adapt the methodology, or we provide the tools to those organizations to adapt themselves when delivering. And so, yeah. So next slide. I think we might have a story. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we did, and which really opened up our kind of our view on things, is how people were finding that connection. One of the methods that we use, in the Curator workshops that we do, is a tableau. And again, we can go into that another time. But one of the things that we use as an example of that was in Indonesia, a case study in Indonesia where there was, there was a raid done by quite extremists, and it was in one of the smaller cities in Indonesia of a Christmas celebration. And what we didn't realize was one of the participants was someone who was part of that community where they were the victims. They were one of the survivors of that raid. And so as a, again, part of the Christian community in this town, when we started to have those, when she didn't know what she was, she didn't, we hadn't introduced Abdulrahim or Stephen or myself into when we started the workshop. But it was that fear that she had as soon as she saw Abdulrahim walk in. Abdulrahim, if you saw in, I think there's the caricature of him in one of the slides. He's a very tall man with a large beard, and happened to look like one of the ones that raided. And she feared for her life, and she wanted to actually get out of there. And this is actually what she said. But then having the conversation, getting that connection with Abdulrahim became so important, and she then learned. So we did have a lot of those types of connections where you have a perception, and having not have conversations with people of a different, that are different from you, for her was she used that actually as an empowering kind of exercise that led her to seek more knowledge on this and information. And I think it was one of the groundbreaking things that we saw. Another one was we always had also a psychologist on board to be able to have these conversations to make sure that we took care of and the well-being of all our participants. But it's those types of conversations and these stories that really transformed the dialogues for us. Next slide.
Next. Yeah, another story. I guess the background of this is we've started working in really focused work in Sri Lanka, working with teachers in the Gampola district. So we've been working with teachers from different, I guess, faith schools and multi-faith or multicultural schools as well. And we had one story come out from, and the prompt was, what is a story that initiated your want to become a teacher? So we'll call her Fiona. She got in trouble when she was a young girl, and the head teacher approached her, and of course Fiona is from a minority community, and the head teacher put a sign around her that said, "Beware of Fiona." And she had to walk around school for the next week with that sign on. Telling these stories, as you will imagine, is triggering, and we ask people with care to lean into that discomfort. What we saw when she told that story is everybody come around her, but it was so cathartic for her to tell the story, especially the next day when we unpacked a bit. I said to her, Fiona, I know you want to work around the world. I think the world should beware of Fiona. And right there for her, it changed the narrative and allowed her to, what she said was, in 2 days, I got more than 20 years of counseling. Now that's just one little story, but we have every time we do this, and there's a lot of tears, as you will imagine. Every time there are realizations, new connections made, and that's why we're so invested. We've tried different forms of bringing people together, peace, love, and understanding, and for us this kind of is so visceral and so contact laden that it's powerful. That is what has made for the most powerful work we've ever done. I think we're on the last slides, and yeah. So this was a train the trainer in Tunisia that we ran for 5 countries, funded by Meta Facebook. And so I think that's it. Thank you. We'll take your questions, and I see there's one in the chat.
Thank you, Stephen and Ima. I think the last story that you shared really stood out, and I think it also connects to the thought that I also had that Monica's asked in the chat. As a gatherer of stories, how is Charita able to quickly sort of establish trust with the storytellers, or in this case with Fiona, particularly if you are from a different culture?
Ima?
Yeah, I think for us it is being vulnerable ourselves. Whenever we start one of these workshops, we do introduce ourselves. We talk about all of our vulnerabilities as well, and we have among the participants, we make an agreement that this is a safe space, and we thought that would be. And initially, when we started it was like no one's going to open up or connect, and we were. Every single time we've been surprised. Every single time we've done this, within the first half of the first day, you find that people open up in different ways, by listening, by being present, by having those stories, by telling those stories. And oftentimes, it starts with me, Stephen, and Abdulrahim, or some of our other facilitators. You always find someone in the group that you think, oh, this person is probably not going to be open, and was very reserved, and I think very skeptical of the methods. But once they did listen, they were able to open up in ways that they surprised themselves oftentimes. I think this happened, I remember in Tunisia, well, actually everywhere that we did it, but Tunisia really stood out for me. But yeah, being vulnerable ourselves.
Yeah, I should also say that we, it sounds quite serious, and especially with the stories that come out, but there's also a lot of play involved. We create a loose atmosphere that allows for people to be, to be vulnerable. Also, I think the unpacking of, identity, allowing for people to, break down where they're not. Identity and experiences allows for us to get quite quickly to human, and once that is opened, it says, oh, this is not just your typical training. We are allowed, encouraged to be brave and dive in. I saw a question in the chat. We worked in Peterborough primarily, especially on the back of Brexit. Abdulrahim and I built our careers in London, so we have a lot of connections there. But in Peterborough particularly, there was, on the back of Brexit, there was a lot of tension between communities, bordering communities had a lot of far right marches and the such, but in Peterborough there was a substantial Polish community that were rubbing against not only the locals but also the local Muslim communities as well. So we went in within that context.
Great, thank you for that, both Ima and Stephen. The work that you're doing is just incredible and so grounded and real. I think we are towards the end. I think a fun fact that Sayonee actually shared is that Jarita, the way Jarita is pronounced in Sanskrit, also means story. So excited to just identify that synergy. Thanks, Sayonee, for that. We will now move on to Rosie, who is our Global Director of Storytelling and Communications at the Center for Public Impact, who will take us through a little bit about what we at CPI are doing with storytelling. Over to you, Rosie.
Thanks so much, Anognia, and thank you so much to all of the panelists who have spoken so far. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear from everybody, and I have learned such a lot, which I suppose is the point of this. I am conscious that we have a little bit less time than we thought, and I'm also conscious that I have quite a strong accent that maybe everybody's not used to. So what I'm not going to do is talk extra fast. I will try to talk slowly, but I might just ask to skip past some of the slides that we have. And we will share the slides after, so that means that people can go in and look at the details of those, but let's just focus on the themes. So as I said, I'm Rosie, I'm based in Glasgow in Scotland, and we'll move to the next slide. For this, we are particularly interested in thinking about not just how do we tell stories, but why is participatory storytelling important in complex systems? And all of our CPI colleagues, or many of our CPI colleagues, will have big, long explanations of understanding complex systems and what they mean. I don't think we need to go into that. I think we can understand that anything that involves people, anything that involves multiple actors, anything in social impact is complex. It means that it's not a factory where you put something in and you take something out and you have a fixed outcome. It's all a little bit messy. And we have the vision for government at CPI, which again, have a look at our website and learn much more about it. But the 3 key points in our approach to working in complexity are, first of all, to embrace complexity. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. We try to operate as if the system wasn't complex, so we embrace it. The second is that we have space for experimentation and trying things differently. And the third is that we need to build trusting relationships with communities and citizens. Okay, next slide, actually. Thank you. And we believe that using storytelling is a really strong way to encourage this public participation with citizens, with households and communities, so that people feel truly involved with their government, and so that the governments and other organisations working in social impact are able to earn the trust and earn the legitimacy of their communities. Lovely. So there's a really nice framing of stories in complex systems, which comes from Ella Saltmarsh, who wrote in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. And she talks about these 3 different ways of understanding stories. And she talks about stories as light, story as glue, and story as web. All of these concepts have come up in everything that we've heard so far today. So it's been fascinating to hear, like, there's been little lights going on in my head as people have been talking. So a story as light, I think about that as helping us to understand things about ourselves, our identities, our work, and about each other. So that could be that we're evaluating what we do. It could be that we're looking forwards and thinking about the ways that we can change things in future. So it was really interesting to hear Saurav talking about the dream cities and thinking about how story can be used to reimagine something different in future. The second concept is this idea of story as a glue. So it's something that keeps us together. It builds empathy and connection and those relationships and trust. And it can inspire us and remind us of the values and goals that motivate us. And then the concept that it took me longest to get my head around was this idea of story as web, and this idea that there are these underpinning grand narratives and stories that shape the way that our communities and societies work, and that they're made up of lots of smaller stories, and that we can work together to learn about the stories, to reach out and to change the story and flip that narrative, which also came up in what Emma and Stephen was saying there. So we'll have a little look at how these operate within what CPI do. There's been a lot that's come up already about what makes a good story, so I'll not dwell too long on this, but for me, the most important thing is that it feels authentic, it feels real, it's come from real people. We don't try to gloss over this messy and complex business of being a human being. The other thing I think is important about a story versus just a series of events is that it shows something that's changed, and we can think about what we can learn from it. And the third thing is that it creates a sense of connection. It feels relatable. I remember reading a quote that said that stories are always just a mirror that we look into, and we resonate and we feel something, and it can change the world around us, but it can also change us. Thank you. Something that's come up across the different panelists who've spoken today is this idea of making sure that we are respectful of the story holders and the storytellers, and that we never think that we can just like hear one story and think that we know everything. So it's very important that we understand that every single perspective is unique and valuable, as the panelists have all said today. And I like to think about it as a sort of mosaic or constellation of stories that come together to form a bigger picture. Stories have power. they're hugely powerful. If they didn't have power, then the governments wouldn't ban TikTok. It's always a good way to think about it. And how we use those stories interacts with that power balance. So I love this quote. I have 4 quotes in here that I love all of them. I'll probably say I love this quote before each of them. But this was from Rupa Sahu, who's from FADMA, which is one of the agencies in India who we've been working with. She appeared in our Reimagining Government podcast, and she said, "Where numbers end, the story begins." And I love this as an example of stories as light. So we'll go to the next slide. So it's this idea that stories can convey this complex information. They can help us understand what needs to happen. They can help us understand the impact of our work in a way that's accessible without dumbing down. Okay, I'm just going to skip past this one because it feels like a lot of text. And I'm also going to skip past this one, but I would encourage anybody who looks at the slides to go back and have a little look. So an example from our work at CPI is the work that we've been doing with Rights Lab, which is a collaboration with the University of Nottingham, and it's to understand the experiences of survivors of modern slavery. Obviously, this is a group whose stories are hugely unheard, or if they are heard, are often very sensationalized, and the people who tell the people who have experienced the stories don't often have much control over them. So we're running workshops with survivors where they're going to co-produce their own animated stories in small groups. And these stories will support understanding, programme evaluation, and inform future practice by government interventions in modern slavery. Okay, next slide. Okay, next quote. "In the end, stories are about one person saying to another, 'This is the way it feels to me. Can you understand what I'm saying? Does it feel this way to you?'" And this one's from Kazuo Ishiguro, who's one of my favourite authors. Could we go to the next slide? Thanks, actually. So this has come up over and over again today. Stephen and Nima have been talking about it. The idea that stories are about us connecting with each other, making sense of things together, understanding, fostering this empathy and inclusivity, and embracing the complexity of a situation and understanding it at a systemic level. Thank you. And again, lots of really interesting information in here, but I'll allow people to have a look at that when they get a chance to. So an example of using stories in this way in CPI comes from the Early Help and Custody Service, which is based here in Scotland. In Scotland, we have big challenges with deaths from drug use, and many of traditional approaches have focused on either punishing or supporting people with punishing people for using drugs or supporting people with stopping taking them. The service learned that a big proportion of people who die from drug use have been in police custody in the previous 6 months. So they work to reach out to people at that point and think about all the things that are going on in their life that they could support them with to stop them from getting to that point. So we worked with the frontline workers, many of whom also have lived experience of drug problems, so that they could run story circles and capture audio stories to understand all those diverse perspectives within the system and to build empathy, to foster connection, and to change the way that things happen in future. Okay. Next one. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who's a Nigerian author, she said, "Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanise. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity." Okay, next slide. So ultimately, what this comes down to for us is that stories can reimagine the relationship between government and people. It can empower people, it can change, it can flip the narrative, good storytelling work can support social impact work in all these complex ways. And again, I'll not go through all of these just now because we are short on time. Thanks, actually. So an example from CPI, it's been great that I've heard so many panelists today talking about this idea that it's not just that we need to tell stories, it's also that we need to think about the ways that we listen to stories, we value stories, and we create space and infrastructure for them. So the latest example from CPI, which is only around about a week old, is from our team in Australia and New Zealand, who've partnered with Decibels Forum and Hands Up Mali to explore how government and philanthropy can get better at listening to stories. So you can visit our website to read the report. We also have some animations that go alongside them. And on Tuesday, November 28th, there will be a webinar exploring this idea of story listening. It will be very early for those of you who are in Asia, but you can watch it later on YouTube if that's helpful. So I will leave you with something that really resonates for me and really captures for me why stories are important. Like, of course, data is important, of course, numbers are important, but I think that stories go beyond that. Maya Angelou said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rosie. And I know we have sort of run over time, and we respect everyone's time, and we are sort of aware that we are what 3 minutes over. And we kindly request just a couple of minutes of your time for a final wrap up. And in case you have other engagements, we'll in any case share the recording with all the participants for your convenience. Well, great. I'm super excited. And as we close this session today, I wanted to share a few concluding thoughts, which we have been sieving out from all these amazing presentations that we had. While we started by emphasizing the power of participatory approaches, valuing local wisdom and community collaboration, we then moved to technology emerging as a tool and not an end, and empowering storytelling from various remote parts of India and the world, and bridging communication gaps. We also discussed that the essence of impact measurement lies in listening to lived experiences, challenging the existing extractive practices for accountability at scale. And we believe storytelling stood out as a transformative force, building in empathy, understanding, and movement building. Uh, Lastly, our focus on global collaboration and inclusivity through digital platforms resonated with a lot of us, creating a network for shared knowledge and experience. Um, I'd also here want to emphasize CPI's commitment to championing participatory and human-centric approaches like storytelling in Global South. We'll soon be starting to build a community around participatory approaches and storytelling, and your involvement would be crucial in nurturing this community as well and making it a vibrant space for collaboration. And you'll be hearing very soon from us on that. 28th is our next storytelling webinar, as Rosie already shared. So do join in if that is a convenient time for you. And lastly, I express my sincere gratitude to Ima, Stephen, Saurav, Sayonee, Tripti, and Rosie for your time, and all the participants who also joined in for sharing your valuable insights, questions, comments, and making this discussion truly enriching. Thank you for being part of today's exploration. Uh, we had to skip a couple of sessions and discussions due to time. And we look forward to our continued engagement in shaping narratives for positive change. We hope this has been useful for you, and wishing you all a wonderful day ahead. Thank you, folks.
Thank you
Thanks
so much,
all.
buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
All the best.
Thank you.